Sometimes life is yikes.
And that's okay. You're not alone. Welcome to Yikesland. Hi, and welcome to Yikesland, our podcast about dealing with depression and mental illness. And sitting here with the beautiful views from Yikesland, I am here with my co-host
Jelani Hoon, your Yike.
And I am Chris Fung, your other Yike. We are glad you're here today. Excuse my voice. It's a Yikesland voice today.
Yes, it's a total Yikesland voice today. We're gonna get really deep, very sincere, very in ASMR on you guys today.
Yeah, this is maybe not so soothing, but we'll find out. This is our second episode of Yikesland 2019.
Whoop, whoop.
New year, new Yike.
That's right.
I don't know what that means, but it sounded
Listen,
okay.
we're going to make it into something, right?
Yeah.
Any phrase we can fit Yike into, we're going to make it into something. New year, new Yike. That's right.
We are happy to be here with you guys on another wonderful Tuesday. It is a good Tuesday because you are here with us. We've all made it to 2019. We've made it to another Tuesday. We're proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, folks out there, thank you guys so much for joining us here. You guys can follow us on all of our social media pages: Twitter at Yikesland, Facebook at Yikesland, and Instagram at Yikesland_podcast. 2019, still hate that. And of course, if you guys got any questions, comments, stories, or you want to reach out and just talk with somebody, please just send us an email at yikesland@gmail.com. So that's yikesland, one word, @gmail.com. And we'll take a look in there if there's anything that if you send us something that you would like us to read on the air, as like a personal story or a question or a topic idea or something like that, we'll be more than glad to oblige you guys out there. And that's pretty much all we got here for you guys. So see you guys next. No, John. No, but we're gonna start the podcast off how we start off every Tuesday. How are you?
I am, other than the fact that my voice is bad. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just okay.
Yeah, just okay. I think sickness makes me so similar to the fact that, like, you know how when you can't get out of bed or you're having trouble doing the dishes or something, you feel bad about yourself because of a productivity thing. Because especially for me, and I know a lot of other depressed people like this, when you are not being as productive as you want to be, you feel like that's a value judgment on yourself. Mm-hmm. And so that definitely bleeds over for me with being sick, where if I am not able to be as number one me as I wanted to be because I'm sick, I feel a little bit bad about myself. So I've got that going on. But other than that, things are okay. How are you?
Everything is going just dandy. Dandy, So, well, I mean, things, I feel like we talked about it at the end of 2018, but yeah, there was the whole spiral moment. But after trying to, using my break glass in case of emergency depression, I corrected that, pulled myself out of tailspin, and I have been steadily kind of just keeping everything on the level. Right.
That's good.
Things haven't gotten worse. They haven't, super shot up too exceedingly great yet. But I mean, I have a pretty big positive outlook for 2019 right now, for a journey to trying to get to a very comfortable level instead of just, And of course, yes, we're in the bitter, bone-chilling coldness of winter right now, and the depression is hitting strong right now. But other than that, of course, if you guys don't know, the depression is just when, seasonal depression disorder and stuff like that, but mixing together to make a super bug of depression that is just making you very sluggish and very just not willing to do much. Have you found yourself really stuck in a rut, or have you been able to pull yourself out of that?
The depression hasn't been as bad. I would like to be getting up in my mind, the best me gets up before sunrise and like does exercise and makes smoothies and things. And like comparing myself to that ideal, I'm a terrible person. But comparing myself to a more realistic ideal, no, I'm doing okay. You know, waking up at like 9 is not a bad person thing to do. Like, just because I have set the expectation that waking up at 6 is the only good person thing to do. But no, there's maybe 20, 30 minutes in the morning where it is still hard for me to get up, and I'm like, but why should I? You didn't wake up at 6, and so you're worthless. And then I remembered that that is not how it works. So, you know, usually it used to be that the depression would last for hours. Like, it's hours before you can get out of bed and do something, because you're like, well, and the problem with having depression in winter is that those were all the hours of daylight that there were going to be, and now you've lost them. So having cut it down to like 20, 30 minutes, I think is a good step. So that's been okay. But yeah, I think having depression combined with the time of year that it is can be really draining. Yeah. Because you have a limited amount of time to get up while it's still light, and it can be hard to get up while it's still light. And then you get up in the dark, and then you feel bad like a subhuman creature that only lives in the dark.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like the darkness is where we find our solace.
Which is not true. You're totally still full of value even if you get up in the dark. But I also get that you may share the thing with me where that's what your voice, like your bad depression voice, tells you, that like, you like terrible vampire situation of a person. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully everyone out there is doing just fine. You know, hopefully you're not spiraling out at all. And hopefully all of you guys are, you know, trying to reach out and create a community and create a dialogue with other people who you can connect to, who are in the same boat as you. Because there are many, right? As much as the depression bug wants to, you know, break you down and tell you that you're the only one, and, you know, everything is just spiraling out and everything would be better, you know, if things were, you know, not here, or if you weren't here. Don't believe that, guys. You are not alone. We're here as proof that you're not alone, and there are many more other avenues to show you that you're not alone as well. So connect with somebody, talk with somebody if you can about it, and you know, it's always great to just have a dialogue at least once a week where we can say, how are you doing, you know, and be completely 100% totally honest about it, right? That's how you do it, right? So just be open, just be talking about it, and hopefully it can guide you to self-realization, right? It's not, and it's almost like therapy, kind of. It's just talking. That's all it is. It's just talking. So topic of the week for Yikesland 2019 second episode is, how do we define depression? It's been a long time coming. We've had about 9 episodes of not really defining how we view what depression is. And we've also had a lot of people ask us too, what do we think depression is? And so we've been sitting on it for a little bit and stewing on it and really going back to the drawing board and things like that of how we feel about it. So are we prepared for this?
As ready as I can be.
Well, Chris, what is your definition or outlook on depression? What is it?
Well, I mean, obviously this is a huge question, and there's a very scientific answer. You know, there's like if you look it up in the DSM, you know, you can find a definition of depression. But I think that the more interesting thing becomes how the way that each of us views depression and how the way that each of us defines depression can affect the ways that we deal with it. Because obviously you know, what we found out in this, even in the span of this podcast, is that, you know, you think that you're totally alone. You think that the way that you see your depression is unique and it's something that only you are going through. And in some ways that's true. There are things that are unique to your struggle, and I don't mean to take that away, but there's also a lot of stuff that you don't realize other people are going through the same, like, terrible, you know, thinking traps or just like ruts of thinking that you are. And so talking about that with each other can feel very validating, because you realize how much you have in common with other depressed people. And that's definitely happened, even for me listening to you talking. But I think that the ways that you define depression for yourself based on your own experience do have a big impact on how you deal with it and how you try to fight it or not fight it or live with it, and forgive yourself and all that stuff. So I think it's really interesting to interrogate the way that you define it for yourself and see how that affects things. That's not my answer yet. That was just a big old preamble. I'm sorry.
That was the intro to your intro. Let's do it. I'm ready.
But I think for me, the way that I define depression is very much affected by how long I have had it. So I've mentioned this before, but I've had depression for so long, on and off and higher and lower, but I've experienced depression and depression symptoms with other, mental illness symptoms for so long that it's really, for me, become such a part of who I am that I do have a lot of trouble parsing it from my real personality. And in some ways, and we were talking about this a little bit before we got into the podcast today, but in some ways, I don't even look at depression as solely a bad thing anymore. Because for me, since I've had it for so long, it has taught me good lessons. It has taught me to be more grateful for other people and for happy times. It has taught me to be more forgiving of other people and myself, because there is such a harsh voice that comes with depression, and you have to learn to fight that. And so I've gotten stronger from having depression. And so in a lot of ways, I'm really grateful for it. Mm-hmm. But all of those developments cause it to sort of be inextricable to me from my personality. So I guess the way that I would define depression is more through how I experience it, which is sort of like a general sad hopelessness cloud, which is the least scientific definition that I could have chosen.
Yeah. It's totally you, though. It's you.
But yeah, it's a general sad hopelessness cloud, or, it is reflected in the name of our podcast, which is Yikesland, where you're living in sort of an alternate reality where everything is just like kind of bad all the time. And some of it is really bad, and some of it is just a little bit bad. So I think that the way that I view depression is kind of almost like depression is an outlook on life. And it's not an outlook that I believe that you are choosing. I don't think that if you just think more positively, you won't have depression. But it's sort of like because of circumstances, you are unpleasantly forced to like live in an alternate reality where even things that aren't really bad seem bad or turn bad, and then things that are, maybe easy or fine for other people are hard for you. It's kind of like one of those dreams that you have where you're like trying to run away from something, but everything's slippery and you keep falling down. That's what depression is like to me. And I think that, you and I have somewhat similar definitions of depression, but I'm interested to know, how yours is different. And I'm also interested to know, because I gave such a non-scientific, non-clinical answer, what you think about the amount that depression is, a chemical imbalance or inflammation in the brain, and the amount that it's just sort of a Yikesland that's happening to you.
Well, so with the amount of time that I've spent with depression and the amount of time I've realized that I've had depression, I've lived with it for quite some time, and learned to try and live in it for quite some time. And so my outlook on depression is, I believe that it is an illness. I almost believe that I do believe that it's sort of a disease, that is affecting a person, and it affects their outlook on not only their life but themselves, the self value of themselves as well. That's a major one because that's the one that like really devastates their lives, because they think they're not worth it, and it basically creates. It almost makes you into a kind of an introvert to the maximum degree,
Sure.
if you will, and so it gets very hard to feel things, and your emotions are out of whack, and the way that you think is very like you say, it's very almost like you're thinking as like a different being from another dimension or something like that. It's not how you act around here. It's, the things you like, the things you don't like, but like the depression is throwing you so out of whack that you almost feel like everything is just or it's okay to just live in all this black and darkness and stuff like that, and you can't see the end of the tunnel or something like that. I believe that there are multiple different types of depression as well. I think that they all can be affected by different things. And I think that like trauma is one of them. Like someone who is, built off of, you can have depression that's built off of fear, off of a trauma that was
Sure.
created off of something. So a lot of people who have dealt with the war and being soldiers and stuff like that, I think that can create a depression in them because they no longer feel at home in the world, and they no longer feel here, or they feel fear that the war is always there, it's always around, and that's the way that their depression has kind of hardwired their brain to be at that moment. And I think that there's kind of the self devaluation type of depression where something has happened to you in your life, and or maybe the circumstances around in your environment that you've grown up in can bring you down to a point that like you are broken down.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. That's what you see a lot of people who have grown up in very harsh environments and who can't bring themselves out of it, and eventually end their lives. And that's one way. I believe that there is a almost route of depression where it is purely chemical, where your body just goes out of whack, and that we see that happen a lot with just other diseases as well, where your body just eats away at itself or something like that, or it just destroys itself. And I think that's another avenue as well. But the difference is here is that there are so many different types of avenues, and not only is depression a hard thing to deal with, but it is a killer mixture to a cocktail of mental illness. Mental illness is the overall disease, right? Is the overall end boss at the end of the game, if you will. It is, if you have depression and you mix it together with all these other mental issues, OCD or anxiety, or and while some people may argue that that is not depression, if you will, but I think that they are harsh mixtures to this cocktail that we call, mental illness, and it can affect one another very easily. They are brothers and sisters, and
Yeah.
they will affect each other wholeheartedly no matter what. And so it's about combating all these different mixtures of this cocktail that you have inside of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also see people who have different like variations of like how their depressions manifest. We have people who have like manic depressive people who are just like seem like that they're overstimulated and almost they have like endless energy, but they're like very at the same way very devalued inside as well. And then you have the people who are introverted to the maximum, that shut themselves off and cut their friends off and cut their family off and just want to shut themselves off from the world and wither away. And there are so many different variations of it, and trying to boil it down to a single simplified like term is very hard for me especially. But I think that it's a disease, it's an illness that you get from whatever the avenue that you have gotten from, whether it be environment, whether it be trauma, whether it be something that's happened, that causes you and your mental stability to break, Depending on when you got it, like that's another thing as well. Like the younger you get it, the harder it is to get out of it, because you're hardwired from a young age,
Yeah. And you've been using the word hardwired a lot. Do you think that depression is something that once you have it forever? Or
and that's another thing that a lot of people have asked me before. And I think that it's something, I don't believe it ever goes away, right? I don't think it 100% ever goes away. I think that you can get to a point that you can combat this disease to a point that you can live and cope with it to the point where you almost believe that it's gone, right? But I think that you can't succeed 100% of the time, right? And so when you look at it, and if you believe it's gone, and I'm glad that you believe it's gone, I want you to stay that way. But if something harsh happens in your life, another trauma, another issue, or something that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, you may spiral again, right? And it's almost like akin to addiction, almost, right? Where you were wired to think one way for so long, right? And you have lived in it and you got so used to it. And after a while, it was like you're just kind of coasting on this depression. I don't want to call it high, but lows. And when you feel like you've kicked it, and then the moment that something traumatic happens or something that's going to push you, can you hold? And if you can't, it may happen. I'm not gonna say it is. And if for those of you out there who believe that you have cured it and believe that you're away from it and everything like that, I mean, more power to you guys. I really want you to stay that way, and I want you to continue believing in that. Because everything that you're doing something right for you, right? And the whole point of this podcast is for us to relate to people, so that way we can help them think about what their depression is or what their mental illness is, and hopefully maybe even start self-help, right? Because self-help is the strongest help that you can get, to start with. I mean,
and I mean, sometimes that will mean that you guys disagree with what we're saying.
Yeah. I mean,
because we're not saying anything universal or anything that's, we're not doctors telling you this is how depression works. We're just telling you our experiences or the experiences of people that we know, because we're in kind of a weird depression community. But, sometimes what we're saying will make you think something, and it'll make you think, oh, I totally disagree with that. But I think it can be powerful that you're thinking about it at all.
And that's a great thing. It's like, I want you to disagree if you disagree, because it makes you think about it, right? If you disagree with what I'm saying, or if you disagree with what Chris is saying, I understand, right? It's not this depression, this mental illness that we deal with. They can't just be, quantified down to a simple term. There's so many different branching paths of this. It's a spiraling issue. It's hard. It's almost like trying to describe what a reflection is, and or what a ghost is. You can't quantify it down to a very simple term of like, oh, it's only just this, and you can cure it with this, or you can get rid of it with this. But at the same time, looking at like the depression and the mental illnesses that are in each and one of us, if you have it, I think that starting off with self-help is very powerful and very strong. And I think that some people are even strong enough and strong-willed enough to self-help themselves out of the depression, if they will, and that's great. And I'm glad you can do that. And the whole point of this podcast is to start a dialogue with people, to get people thinking about what it is to them, to what their feeling is to them. Are they thinking that it's something that's, devaluing themselves? Is it something that came from a trauma? Is it something that they need to talk to someone about? Like, that's the steps, realizing that you need help and that you want help. That's self-help right there, and then after a while, whether or not you're going to pursue outside help, that's up to you, but it's the thought and the thinking process and getting the gears turning. And that's what we want from it, and so I don't believe this will ever go away or anything like that, but I believe that everything that I looked it up earlier in a definition of depression, right? Depression's defined in the dictionary as a feeling of severe. I'm sorry, read the depression. I'm not gonna butcher words on air over here.
Feelings of severe despondency and dejection, and I think that is, this is just the dictionary definition. It's not like the DSM definition, but it is hilarious to me.
Yeah,
because it so understates everything that is the Yikesland that depression is, and like that's fine because you can't express like the misery of depression in like a dictionary, but it makes me laugh, not in a bad way, like I look down upon that definition, but just it makes me laugh at the absurdity of the concept of even being able to define depression in a sentence at all, having experienced it. But I think going back to something you were saying earlier about kind of the concept of relapse, I think it's interesting that you bring it up as an addiction, or for me, having had an eating disorder, they tell you similar things in therapy where it's like once you have an eating disorder, you have it forever and you're in recovery forever. And whether or not the symptoms of it come back, the symptoms may come back when you're triggered by something or just changes in your life, or they may never come back, but they kind of teach you that to always act like you're in recovery and always be a little bit, kind of like careful with yourself, or just know that those are brain pathways that can easily come back to you. And I think thinking about it as an addiction or similar to an eating disorder in that way, or thinking about the concept of recovery, can be helpful because sometimes, and you may have experienced this too, sometimes there's a little bit of blame language around depression from people who haven't experienced it, or even people who have experienced it towards you. Like I told my story in the first couple of episodes of this podcast, and I had a doctor that told me, well, you wouldn't be depressed if you just go out and get a job. And to me, that was the worst possible thing I could have been told, because and I started crying in the office and I left still crying because I was like, don't you think that I would be a normal person, like a functional person if I could? Don't you think I want that? I would love to have a job. I would love to be able to get out of bed and just go to a job every day. But I could barely make it to this psychiatrist appointment. And so I can't do that. And trying to express, I know it sounds like a normal thing to do, just get a job, but I can't make myself do it. The distance between what I was able to do and what I was being told to do was so great. And so I think a lot of times, that can feel like you're being blamed, where it's like, well, have you tried being happy? Have you tried thinking more positively? And I know that that's a common experience that happens to a lot of depressed people. But when we talk about, being in recovery and the concept of relapse and stuff, it reminds us, that you wouldn't or shouldn't, tell someone who struggles with alcoholism, well, it's your fault for relapsing. And I think that it's important that we not ever think it's anybody's fault for falling back into a depression spiral and stuff like that. I also think, to your point earlier about how you define depression for yourself, and that it's important to think about how you're doing that. Maybe you'll find that the way that you are thinking about depression is very productive for you. Maybe if you believe that you can sort of talk yourself out of depression, that you can partially or even, completely talk yourself into a more positive mindset. And that's never worked for me. And so I know that that's not an option for me, that I do want to think more positively, but that I know that at least for me, that's never going to quote unquote cure my depression. But maybe you also find that the way that you're thinking of depression is closing yourself off from other avenues of help. Like maybe if you're thinking that depression is only chemical and so you've just been taking medication, that maybe you realize, oh, well, maybe there might be a part where I can learn to talk to myself differently. And so maybe now I'll try therapy or something like that. So I think it's, important to think about how does the way that you are defining depression affect what, treatments you're opening yourself up to. And for me, and I've talked about this before, I don't experience depression as purely chemical because I've been put on and maxed out on medications before, and that did not, cure me. And so to me, I'm like, okay, well, that's proof for me at least that this isn't just a thing where you can like turn on or off a chemical switch and then things are going to get better, and that it is, at least whatever's happening in my brain, much more complicated than that.
Yeah, and it's a killer cocktail of different things, if you will, and looking at it like it can be like an emotional state. It can be like the way that you have the environment that you put yourself into. Like shutting yourself off and being used to it. And having it attached to the emotions, if you will, and have it attached to your inner core of yourself. And that right there is something where it's difficult, and it's hard to know what pathways to take. It's not just like something you can throw pills at. It's not something that you can do. And even pills don't 100% solve every issue. Even if people are dealing with chemical imbalances, because you don't know which one to use. Some of them cause side effects. And we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But this is all about creating a dialogue of trying to guide people to their own answers, because we don't have an answer for you guys. We don't have an answer of what to cure your mental illness is and what your depression is. I don't even have the answer for mine. I don't have, I don't know if I can even have the answer for you, Chris. No, I wish I could, but at the same point, it's about talking and creating this community so that way we can take a look at ourselves and take a look at other people who have, really done a deep dive in themselves and their opinions on it, and try and see if we can glean some sort of different way of thinking about it. I have thought about it differently since talking with you on this podcast, and I hope that like the same way with you as well. But hearing other people's stories and knowing what they go through on a daily basis, or what they've gone through in the past, is always an interesting aspect of this, of like knowing how everyone's has a completely different look on it.
And I think back to someone I talked about in a previous episode of the podcast, who told me, and I was really surprised to find out that she was depressed, but who told me that she had tried medication in college and it worked for her. Like, her depression is essentially, in terms of her experience, gone away, but that she has to be on it for the rest of her life. And so obviously, there's lots of different there must be lots of different like brain things happening if she can just take this medication and she's fine now. She's like the happiest person I know. And I can try lots of medications and none of them work for me or really even affect my mood at all. So it's everybody's brain is there's some science there, and then there's also pathways that we create ourselves. And it's all I think it's all mixed up to the point where there's not going to be one answer for you for the entirety of your life if you're somebody that has struggled with depression for a long time, but that it's still a really important exercise to interrogate your beliefs about depression and how they are affecting your ability to, try new things to affect your depression, or how they have affected in the past the things that you have tried. There's some people that totally don't believe in therapy, or some people that totally don't believe in medication. And if what you've been doing so far hasn't been working for you, it is maybe worth it to talk to a medical professional and ask about other options. But I think it's not there's no answer for everybody. And even within the people that even within our circle of friends that are all for some reason depressed. We've definitely seen, especially because of us doing this podcast, people with vastly differing opinions on that stuff. And that's okay. You can have whatever opinion you want. And I would hope, though, that you find an opinion that works for you. So at least for me, I'm like totally fine with kind of lying to myself in order to make my depression better, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, you know? So if I want to, like, if I want to tell myself that, hey, there's like 20% of this that you can fix with positive thought. I don't know if that's true, but like, why not try that? And why not try thinking more positively? And I think that's a lot of what I'm trying to do in 2019, because so far up until this point, because depression has been so inextricable from my personality, I'm like, well, I guess this just is what it is. And that might be true. This may be what it is, and I may never be able to change from this exact point. But I'm going to just tell myself that a percentage of this could be changed for me with thinking differently. And so that's a lot of what I'm trying to focus on in 2019. And that's why one of my resolutions was to go back to therapy too, you know, to see what parts of that I can maybe nudge in a more livable direction.
Yeah. And, you know, it perhaps also, like, you know, going with that, like your resolution of like trying to think differently a little bit this year and see if that helps out, and maybe going back to therapy. Like, if you find yourself stalling out or anything like that, maybe try and find someone to talk to, like, just about talking, you know, just find a talk buddy, you know,
double therapy,
or just like, you know, even if you can't seem to like get yourself to therapy in the first place, like, you know, try something, you know, you never know, maybe talking double therapy might work. Maybe having someone who's not really like looking at it
analytically.
Yeah, that word, you know, maybe someone who's not looking at it like through the mind's eye of a medical professional might help you with a different outlook as well, you know. Like looking at it's for the way I look at this, right, is that it's almost like all of us who are dealing with depression are all looking at like a changing ink blot test, right? It's shifting, it's changing, and it's an ink blot. So like everyone sees it differently, but like you can glean something from everybody describing it, but it is different to everybody, you know. And it's a weird thing. I would hope that everyone believes that they're on a path to getting better, you know. Like right now, like I picture everyone just on a road, on their own roads, walking, and with some self-help, you can find a shortcut through, you know, like you can get there, or you can stall out and not move anymore. And that's something we don't want to have happen to you guys, you know. We don't want to have happen to anybody. And, you know, Chris, I believe wholeheartedly that you can get to, you know, a better place. You know, I believe that in my heart of hearts that, you know, right now, you know, you are where you are. But I think that there's always slightly better, you know, and I think that you can get there, you know, with what you're doing, you know. So I believe in you. I hope you know that I believe in you, my Yike. I believe.
Thanks,
in
my
you.
Yike.
All right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something, right? Right now, looking at everything that, you know, you're doing right now to cope with it, right? Like, can you reiterate what you're doing to cope with your depression right now? Just things that's happening right now. That's helping you cope
so
with.
Right now I'm not on any medication. I'm not in therapy. I have a therapy app that is CBT based, and then I am just trying to focus on what I can do in my own brain, as far as the way that I think, to think more positively, and, you know, be like kinder and more forgiving to myself, but also more hopeful, so that I'm doing my homework on this, so that I'm doing what I can and what I think is in my own power, to sort of help, like, I don't believe this is going to cure my depression, but so that I can be in a more like productive and livable spot with the way that I talk to myself, basically.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's about the same for me. Like I don't go to therapy right now. I do have some I do have some medication, more anti-anxiety, exactly, than more harsher like depression pills. But I right now am just trying to think positive on like some things and try and change my outlook on like everything at the moment. So it's a little it's difficult, and then I'm just trying to keep busy. So I deep dive myself in my work and the podcasts and the network as well. So just trying to keep hands busy as you will, so my idle hands don't cause me to close my eyes and go to sleep. I don't know how that works, but yes, it just goes like this, sleep. So but yeah, I would hope that like at this point, like what we're doing right now, by the end of the year, I hope that like things are different, vastly different than what we're listing off right now, and how we're coping with it. Because sorry, because I think that we can always.
It's contagious.
I think we can do better. I think we can. At the moment, I think we, in the community that we're trying to build, and like the podcast that we've built here, that I think that we can step up and take our own self-help a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think we can do that. I think we can do it.
Yeah,
I believe in us. I believe in us now. See?
Yeah, I mentioned when we were talking about our resolutions that for last year, my resolution was basically just, you've stayed alive so far, keep staying alive. That's good. That was like a big deal for me at the time, was, in kind of like this, I think of it as momentum. So at a certain point, I had lost all momentum for living in the Great Depression, and I was just like barely alive, like catatonic in bed, just trying to make it another 5 minutes, and then another 20 minutes, and then another day. And now I've kind of built up enough momentum that I like have hope again in 2019, and I'm trying to do better and be more positive and more productive, and almost like seem like a normal person and all of that stuff.
Now that you've broken the level of just stay alive, now it's time to live.
But I think that it's still a really important step wherever you are in your journey. Maybe you are at just stay alive for 5 more minutes. And if you're doing that, that's fantastic, because that is still a very, very noble place to be at. And like it's not like because I'm more upright and more functional now that I've ever forgotten or will ever forget how hard it is to be at that place. And to me, at least, that was a way harder place to be than I am right now. This stuff is easy. Like, think more positively is way easier than like, how do I cope with existence for 5 more minutes? And so, wherever you are in your journey, if you are, I don't like to think of it as linear. So it's not like if you're ahead of me or behind me, but just wherever you are, I think is really valid and good. And I appreciate so much that you're still trying wherever you are at that. And I hope that later I can look back at where I am right now and appreciate my past self for trying exactly where I am. Just like I appreciate that me who was in bed, unable to get up, for just making it through another 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get there, and it's that route of thinking. Like there's stages to it, and I think you can like keep climbing. And for everyone out there who's doing the same thing, just stay alive, just stay alive, just stay alive for 5 minutes, just stay alive for 10, 20, an hour, day, week, month, year, and then from there it's just stay alive for a year, then transition. Start self-help, adding more and doing what you can, and the transitions from just stay alive to just live, and just live for 5 minutes, just live for 10 minutes, just live for a day, just live, and it's adding on, not just existing, but actually,
being able to do something that gives you meaning and makes you happier, whatever that is.
You want to give back your value. You want to give back the value that you devalued yourself of, that this depression has robbed you of. Just live for 5 minutes, just live for 10 minutes, just live for a day, live for a week, live for a year. And then from there, you want to transition to hopefully where it's just just be fine, and just, where not exactly in those words, but more just be on a copable level. There it goes. That's the word. Just, you want to be able to understand that you are living your best self and you're happy with it, and you want to get there, and so that way when you get brought back down by something, you never know, you can always just go back to, I did it before, just stay alive, just stay alive, just stay alive, just stay alive, just live, just live, just live, just live, just be in a copable level, Well, any final words, anything else?
I'm just happy that you guys are here with us, wherever you are in your journey or your train or whatever type of momentum analogy that we were trying to make here. We're happy that you're here with us. We hope that you guys keep reaching out to us and reaching out to each other and reaching out to medical professionals if that is what helps you. If you guys are really struggling, you should give the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline a call. They can be reached 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. That's completely confidential, and it's a really good resource.
Yeah, if you're feeling like you're really spiraled out, you've hit the bottom, and like you're thinking of some bad thoughts, guys, like it's confidential, it's free, and it's there if you need to talk to somebody. If you don't have anybody around you, please do resort to this before anything else, guys. And thank you guys so much for joining us here. Where you can find us all over social media: Twitter, Facebook at Yikesland, Instagram at Yikesland_podcast. Email us if you need someone else to talk to, or if you want to contribute a topic idea or question or anything like that. Please, by all means, we'd love to hear from you guys. That's yikesland@gmail.com, yikesland@gmail.com, and we can hopefully answer the question for you. I mean, I don't know, we just ramble up here for an hour on depression. Hopefully it makes sense to you guys. If not, you disagree, we understand, but it starts making you think about it. Why do you disagree with it, And that's where you start to turn the gears in your head, and hopefully it gets you to a place of, being okay, right? This has been your host, Jelani Hoodle, along with host
Chris Fung.
And never know what to say at the end here, so enjoy your 2019 and enjoy the views from Yikesland.
Bye, guys.
Bye.